For those of viewers out there, I'm really militant about being on time. So welcome to the show. Just to do a quick introduction, if you're not familiar with the show, this is the Restart Small Biz Speaker Series. This is an exclusive feature that we have as part of the Restart Small Biz community, which is a Facebook group. So if you're a small business owner and you're looking to join really powerful weekly discussions like this, they're completely free with inspirational and insightful speakers like Tim, just join the group. You can also learn more about us at restartsmallbiz.com. We do have our new Amazon bestseller, Restart, the Small Business Guide to Thriving During Chaos. We have it on sale for only $14.99 right now on Amazon. And then the last quick announcement is we now are accepting sponsors to the show. We already have some sponsors on the upcoming show. So if you are interested in sponsoring, again, just go to restartsmallbiz.com. If you click on contact, there's a sponsorship form, and you can actually apply to be a sponsor. We're not accepting, every company that applies. If they're not a good fit with our business model and helping out small businesses, we're not going to accept those companies. But all right, on with the show. Tim, first of all, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about you?
Well, thank you for inviting me, first
Sure.
of all. So I appreciate being able to come out and talk to all your viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And I am an entrepreneur myself, and with a background in finance. So
Mm-hmm.
Even from really when I was younger and so forth, I grew up kind of on the mortgage side of the business,
Mm-hmm.
and my family owned a mortgage company and worked in that. Went to Michigan State University for undergrad. I was finance student of the year.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah, went on the credit side for a commercial bank.
Okay.
And I actually liked it. And one of the foundations of really analyzing companies, getting to the core, and when you first start out, you're they move around in so many different industries and areas, and you kind of see what interests you and so forth. And you get a great foundational look at how to analyze companies, individuals, and so forth. In fact, even with individuals, we had this thing called tax to cash, where we take your tax return and for small business owners and convert it back to what a cash flow was. Because there's so many different tricks and tips in trying to not pay taxes that it makes your income look much smaller.
Right.
And so, moving back and forth. So that was a great foundational experience.
Sure. Yeah.
At that time, they didn't have the line that you could keep working up the whole way. You'd have to become a salesperson or something. And I really liked that underlying analysis.
Right.
And I've really kind of followed that through my whole career up to this point. I did go from there, went to go get my MBA at the University of Chicago.
Arguably one of the best finance schools in the country, guys, but yeah.
Well, I might be biased, but I'd say yes.
Right. Usually Wharton's number 2. So, all right. Yeah.
And from there, went out and more for family reasons, more than anything else, because I was trying to figure out, do you go into investment banking, consulting, or, when you're coming out of those schools, that's kind of the normal route. And I went into trading on the equity side. One, I used my credit skills to be able to analyze the companies. And I didn't have to travel, and I could raise a family.
Nice.
And so, but really from that perspective, but I really knew even when I went there, with how fast paced and the stress and so forth, I could probably only do it a decade. And then it's just, I'm kind of a laid back person. I'm not really, that hard hitting. So
you're not the boiler room.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to stack someone on the back for $20 on the floor. Right. And so I lasted 13 years.
Okay. All right.
And then I was looking for a way out, and a doctor friend of mine, started asking me questions about starting a business.
Okay.
And then, so I said, well, what if we didn't just start one?
Right.
What if we started a lot of them? And then, so that was kind of the first foundation. And one, I wanted to make sure that what he was talking about and how he would work with kids and so forth, that it worked.
Okay.
So we did a little test group still. I was still employed. And then
had the side hustle, which, by the way, good idea out there, guys. So if you're thinking about having your own startup or small business, if you do have the opportunity to do it on the side. There's no conflict of interest. I have to add that in there so my attorney will be happy. So great way to kind of dip your toes in, refine your business model, things like that. But go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you don't, and from a, when we talk about cash flow, personal cash flow is one of those things.
Absolutely.
And then because, I mean, you still have to live, you still have your family, you still have to eat, you still have to have your car or what have you. And so it's not just your business cash flow, but a personal cash flow too. So, in looking at that, I wanted to make sure that the program worked and you could actually sell the thing.
Sure.
And it worked fantastic. And so that gave me the confidence to really jump into it.
Right.
And also allowed me to wear many hats from, legal, marketing, and the business protocols. And it's funny for those that are, jumping in with a franchise or something like that. Technically, this was a franchise, but we were the first franchise.
Wow.
So and the company was from Long Island, New York.
Okay.
And when they got in customers, all they would do is put an ad in the Long Island newspaper.
Right.
People would come.
Very sophisticated.
Right. It was a black and white ad in the local paper, and people would come.
Right.
And we said, that doesn't work anywhere else.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a decade ago. Right. So tell us, after that, and we'll kind of get into some of the meat here. So you worked at Baird too, is that right?
Yeah, so Baird was the investment bank where I was a trader for.
Yep.
And,
okay. All right, gotcha.
And again, I did an internship with Merrill Lynch in New York.
Okay. Yep.
And at the time, they were merging with a company called Smith Newcourt. And so there weren't really jobs there.
Okay.
But I talked to Baird before I left, and they had one internship opportunity.
Sure.
And I didn't know if I wanted to do that.
Right.
So I'm like, so I went to Merrill Lynch, and I said, well, I like trading. Can I just set up a trading internship?
Right.
And they did do that.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, when I was there, then everyone's asking, well, how did you just do trading?
Right.
I said, well, I asked.
Right. Yeah.
I was the only
asking you shall receive.
I was the only one who asked in the whole country that came there, apparently.
Yeah. Well, why don't let's kind of dive into the meat here. So tell us, let's obviously in the area of COVID that we're operating in right now, it's always a challenge, right, to manage cash flow. If you're a small business owner, I've managed 3 of my own, and sometimes it's really, really good. And things are just rocking and you got money rolling in, but sometimes overhead can start creeping up and you're not paying attention to it. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from, when things can get a little lean? So Tim, tell us a little bit about some of the challenges. We're going to start talking about the challenges, guys, and then we'll get into tips that Tim has for you so that you can, more than just cash flow neutral, but, really cash flow positive. So tell us a little bit about some of the common challenges that you're seeing, Tim.
Well, and to build off of what you just talked about. So for example, when things are going well, we don't scrutinize our expenses enough.
Right. Yep.
And we, whether it's nicer office space or something as simple as a credit card machine. Most people might not realize, but each credit card company is very different based on whether you have high transactions and low dollar amounts or high dollar amounts and low transactions.
Okay.
And if you do $1 million in business a year, it can actually save you almost $10,000.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's real money.
Right.
And think about it from the other side. I would rather have $1 in cost savings than $1 additional in revenue.
Tell our audience about that. Why?
And then, now taking everything into account that $1 in revenue doesn't lead to more.
Right.
But,
sure.
So $1 in cost savings, taxes, not taking taxes into account, goes to your bottom line. $1 in additional revenue, you still have to pay all your costs.
That's true. You have your cost of goods sold right in there, right?
Exactly.
Your variable costs.
So you're not actually getting $1 at the bottom.
Yeah.
So any amount of money that you can save from a cost of goods sold perspective, really goes all the way down to the bottom line.
So this is a really good point for those sales and marketing type folks like me, where we're like, no, I'm not worried about my costs. I'll just keep selling and selling. So Tim brought up a great point here that $1 of revenue obviously isn't $1 of profit. And, if we can take that $1 and save that $1, we've already, factored in our costs of goods sold and things like that. So really interesting point.
Right. Well, and a company that I was working with, we worked through financials before as they were just starting out. And on the revenue side, things were going really according to plan.
Right.
And which was great. I was really excited that the numbers were going according to plan. But because the revenues were going so well and the costs were being constrained so much, it was very profitable.
Right.
Well, then they just kept advertising and advertising and advertising, but they really weren't. They were only increasing a 1-for-1 ratio.
Okay, explain what you mean by that to our audience.
And then so revenues were going up, but for every dollar the revenue went up, costs went up by $1 as well.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So technically, if you really want to think about it from another perspective, you were stealing future business and not making any money off of it.
Huh. Wow. Interesting.
And so I know one thing we did, and I won't get into the marketing side and so forth, but it really tracking those advertising expenses and knowing what's effective, what's not effective. What we did on every platform, and I know electronically you can do this a lot better now, but we had a code, and we call it a coupon, for every single different platform.
Yep.
And then in those platforms, that way we knew where that business was coming from, because for our particular business, not everything was done electronically.
Yep.
For example, and there's lots of tips and tricks on this stuff. And I know people talk about the newspaper's dead and so forth. But it does, and depending
which
on
it's not completely. So let's not completely write it off. Yeah,
right.
There are opportunities to generate new business from newspapers still, but obviously it's part of traditional marketing, not digital marketing. So.
Right, exactly. And depending on who your target demographic is, it might actually be a viable option.
Right. Yep.
I don't know if this is really the proper way to go about doing this, but one of the hacks that I had heard and used was we had all of our stuff printed on our own. We didn't go printed through the newspaper. It was very expensive going through the newspaper themselves. And then we found the paper person that delivers it.
Okay, we're not
for that community.
Because I know we've got a couple newspaper people out there. All right, so let's get into. Tim does quite a bit of consulting for small businesses. What are some of well, no, let's not get into mistakes. What are the challenges? If you had to tell us 2 or 3 challenges that you're seeing small business owners face right now, what are those challenges?
Well, especially with COVID. And I'll use an example from this company in Door County.
Okay.
So they have 3 restaurants, different kinds. I believe one's an Asian restaurant, one's Italian, and one's a Mexican restaurant.
Okay.
And so they have a core group of staff that they want to keep at each restaurant.
Right.
So they don't want to let them go. But the restaurants, for the most part, there's not enough business to support all 3.
Right.
Given how much you need to do with surrounding COVID and sanitizing and doing all that stuff with each table. So they came up with a great idea in terms of instead of hiring the additional seasonal staff, they actually just use one facility at the Asian restaurant.
Gotcha.
They serve all 3 menus out of that one, and they split up their kitchen for the different staff.
Right.
And then that way you're only sanitizing the one set of tables and the one group.
Right.
And because they didn't want to lose their cooks, they didn't want to lose all the good servers and so forth.
Right.
And so for them, they were able to really keep all 3 open.
Right.
And now you're still paying rent on the other places.
Right.
But as far as keeping the staff and keeping revenues coming in, it was a kind of a great way to still open and be able to do this.
Yeah, it's, there's something called ghost kitchens. I'm not sure if you've heard of this term. That's exactly what it is. So I was actually talking to someone from the Rhinelander area, actually northern Wisconsin yesterday, and they were talking about this exact same thing that's happening, right? And in the community, there's, all sorts of different restaurants and, obviously some of them have their ongoing overhead, but there's a lot of inefficiencies with having that staff there, especially as businesses drop. So one of the things that they're going to be doing is setting up one of these ghost kitchens, and their local restaurants can bring their folks in. They can make the food there, and then it's all delivered by whatever they're using, Uber Eats or Instacart or one of those services. So customers want to eat in their homes, and they're still making the same great food, and then they're delivering out it, and you don't have obviously as high your lighting bill and your gas bill and water bill and all this other sort of thing. So it might just be a temporary solution, but there are organizations that are just going to say, you know what, we're going to stick with the ghost kitchen, farm it all out. So some restaurants are actually farming all the labor out, And,
Right.
and who knows what's going to happen in the physical restaurant, right? And it's all about folks adapting these days and thinking about our business models in different ways. And I know for some of us, that can be really hard because it might be family business, right? And this is second generation, and we've always done it this way. But, this is a time when we have to think like entrepreneurs, think like we were when we started the business, and say, you know what, our model isn't working right now. And you don't want to just sink with the ship. You need to say, we've got to look at this differently. So,
well, and it leads to two different things, because one being flexible, being able to adapt, pivot, realizing is this a short-term problem or a longer-term problem? Like, is this something that will change, or is it a new normal?
Right.
Or even in this time, is it a new normal for the next 2 years?
Right.
And then maybe it changes.
Right.
Well, so then you get into planning ahead of time, or instead of having to put out fires, man, I'm running out of money. Am I going to be able to make payroll this month? And go from there. Having lines of credit set up for your business.
Okay, so lesson kind of really number one here. Well, if you're in the restaurant, well, I think the first lesson is consolidate, right? If we talked about kind of the labor piece, and then the second one is we might previously have just relied on the cash coming in from inflows from sales, but the second is giving yourself an opportunity to have some peace of mind. In fact, I was just, again, doing some consulting with a client this week, and they have a line of credit, but they're blocked. They don't want to tap this because they haven't tapped it before. But having that line or, an other cash, and giving yourself permission to, number one, go out and get it, but giving yourself permission to go out and use that line of credit is really important.
Well, and the first step is, and they did something right to begin with. Even though they didn't need it, they got it and had it in place.
Correct.
Which is really crucial, because it's very cheap to keep every year. I mean, it's a small fee for them to keep it annualized. But if you do need it, then it's there. Now, the other side of it is, and whether you do it from the business perspective, or a lot of small business owners use a home equity line of credit or so forth, that gets a little more dangerous, because then we talk about you're loading up on your home where your family lives, you live, maybe your parents live. You don't want to lose that house. And so that gets into, is it a short-term problem or a longer-term problem?
And it's tough to know now, because we don't know how long this is going to go on, right?
Exactly. And so that's where you really get into being able to do projections and analyze going forward. What truly are, like, do you have recurring revenue that can support a certain amount of expenses? And then you're really trying to
get, and this is what the banks are looking at, obviously, when they're looking at giving you this line. You don't want to wait, folks, till you've got $100 left in your bank account and say, hey, I'd like a $50,000 line, and no, I'm not willing to give it a personal guarantee, because they're probably going to say, no, thank you, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting, many people, when they're going through projections and so forth, they kind of go, well, yeah, I think we can do this, and I think we can do this, and I think this is about right, and so forth. That is the complete wrong way to go about this. To actually go through and do projections, it takes a lot of analysis, both for your industry, your company, and really your customer. And so you really need to understand all three before you can come up with any type of valid number. And you're not looking for the valid number to just go to the bank and get this line. You want a valid number so you know how much actually money that you need. But also that should help you figure out whether it's a short-term problem or longer-term issue.
So let me go off something there. Do you find, because there's different schools of thought here, but let's say you're going to a traditional bank, and folks, there's all sorts of ways to get money. Obviously, you can use crowdfunding, friends and family, or sometimes friends, fools, and family money, right? So there's many ways to do this. Do you find when, and I know we know the answer with entrepreneurs, but people that have existing businesses, when they're going to get a line of credit, do you find that they don't ask for enough money, too much money, and then why?
It depends on the individual. Some people are very conservative, and some people are complete opposite. And then so that's why it's good to work with somebody that can kind of help you along this process. Because
When you say someone, do you mean someone at a bank or having a consultant you or an accountant or who?
Yeah,
are you talking
either
about
an accountant or a consultant, someone outside the bank. Many times banks can want, they could either be really conservative against you because each bank looks at things a little bit differently. Right. If you're an asset-heavy company, certain banks may look towards that as a very positive thing
because it's liquid and
you can actually sell it and so forth.
Totally. Yep.
And others, if you will give your personal guarantee or if your business has a track record of at least a couple of years, other banks are willing to just go off of your business.
Sure. Okay. And when you say off the business, based off your P&L and the cash that you generated.
Right. Okay. And historically, how your numbers have been, you've been profitable and so forth.
Okay.
And so in looking at that, and so because you have a line that's a certain amount, doesn't mean you have to borrow all of that.
Yeah.
So you're better off getting enough that you may need at some point.
Right. Yep.
And not use it all.
Right.
Than not getting enough and being in a cash crunch.
And having to go back and ask. Because then it becomes tougher, right?
Well, it's a lot more risky. Say your business might need 75 grand.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you only get a line for 50 thinking that, if I need more, I'll go back for more.
Right.
Well, if you've borrowed the 50 and that line is maxed out, it's a lot harder to get that next 50.
Sure. All right. Just because we try to keep these to 20 minutes, tell us, before we go into the Q&A, folks, which we've already got some questions coming in, I think the two main lessons there, is watching our overhead, and cutting that, regardless of the business, as much as possible. Obviously, keeping your variable costs down. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. Getting some sort of line of credit or other sort of money, and having that larger than we need, so we can always go out and use it, and if we don't have to. Any kind of final tip that you'd provide?
And along those lines, there are many other ways to get money. For example, if you have a purchase order, and it's stretched over 3, 4, 5 years, there are lenders that will loan against that purchase order to allow you to get money on it. Or same thing with accounts receivable if people owe you money. And along those lines, accounts receivable and accounts payable. One, you really have to watch the receivables and know who's not paying you. And
don't be afraid to ask it. Ask for it either.
Ask for the money. Ask to get paid. And same thing on payables. If you stretch your payables, it's kind of like a loan to you. But you need to be really careful in terms of how far you push that. Because whoever your supplier is or whoever you're owing money to, if they decide to cut you off, is that critical? And are you sunk if that happens?
Yeah, I mean, last thing on that, I can tell you when I had I guess it was my second business, we did get to the point where we were in a cash flow crunch. We were waiting for a second, what's called a tranche, which is basically, it means a thin slice of French cake, which you guys probably know, or you might not know. But so we'd raised our $500,000 and we were getting it in tranches, and the investors were late to give us the money, and I can't remember the circumstances why, but we'd spent $190,000 on developing software, way more than we'd anticipated, and we were in a crunch to get that done. And I had to cut cash. I wasn't taking a salary. My business partner was taking reduced. And I think our rent was about $1,000 a month. And I just called up our landlord and I said, look, man, can you give me an extra 60 days on the rent? I will, pay you an extra 100 or a couple $100 a month at that point. And so sometimes you have to use unconventional means that you just, if you've had blinders on, you said, look, this is the way our model operates and we can't change that. It's about thinking differently. So, all right, let's go out to our questions here. Okay, we've got a question from Charlie. What should we do when we're in startup mode? Hang on here. What should you do when you're a startup business, but you need the resources to have all the facets that you would imagine included? I understand that investments are great, but what other options that have less risk? So I think here, Charlie's talking about, he's launching, in fact, I know this particular business. He's got a software company, And, when you're raising capital, besides getting an angel investment, which obviously we know very few do, what are some other sources of capital when you're starting out?
Well, with one of those, and I guess since you knew that, I thought of the question a little bit differently in terms of all the resources.
Yep.
One, there are a lot of different resources from a personnel perspective that you can outsource and get access to.
Sure.
Now, from an investment perspective, there is crowdfunding depending on what you're trying to do.
Yep.
There is both.
So Kickstarter, Indiegogo, if you're doing reward crowdfunding, and we're going to do another episode on crowdfunding, so we'll get into more detail.
And if you do equity crowdfunding, even some of those platforms, if you're going to have multiple investors that are going to be involved, like say you want to open the door to a lot of small investors, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000. Some of these equity crowdfunding platforms, the nice thing about them is they will actually take care of all of the shareholder communication.
Oh, okay.
And they may even...
So you don't have to become an investor relations company.
Right, because it can take quite a bit. Say you have a bunch of investors. Well, if you want to actually get something passed, you have to get a majority of people to do it. So if you send emails and people don't actually answer you, then you have to physically send them stuff. And then if they don't answer you, so if you actually don't get over 50%, you can never get anything done.
Right. Yeah.
So that tranche that you would do through an equity crowdfunding, they could actually be just one vote.
Okay. All right.
And then take care of that, and they'll take care of it. And even if one person votes, it counts for all of them.
Right. Okay.
And so that's one in terms of using some of that.
And Charlie, I think Tim, so we'll kind of bounce on to the other ones, and you can get some direct feedback from Tim as well. Okay, Jake, on the topic of ghost kitchens, here we go. Travis Kalanick, founder of Uber, invested heavily in a delivery-only restaurants infrastructure startup called Cloud Kitchens. All right, okay. So thanks for that. We've got Kristen coming in here. What are some of the things to consider when making financial decisions in your business? Minor or major decisions. So let's say Kristen has a company and she's got all sorts of purchases, let's say a company car or new software. What in her mind, what's the process that she should go through? And we're not talking about $100 decisions, but major decisions. What should be those steps?
I would really look
Great question, by the way, Chris.
I would first look at what aspects are the most critical.
Okay.
Like which things can you not do without?
Okay.
And then to what level do you need them?
Okay.
For example, whether that's a particular employee, someone to whether it's working on your books or if it's creating websites or how a programmer, how skilled do they actually need to be?
Right.
All of us want the absolute best person.
Right.
But that best person might cost a lot more.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, there was a web company and they had started out, and before they had even created anything, they had raised $10 million. An unbelievably amount of money. So they hired one of these best programmers at almost $1 million a year.
One?
Okay. Just this one
and
person.
Probably gave them equity.
And so that was, their offices were lavish. They were all this stuff. Well, the way they created it wasn't actually how the customers wanted it.
Right.
It was how the people selling the items wanted it.
Right. Yeah.
And then so they actually had to go back and raise more money.
Right.
And then fire this person because they didn't have enough money anymore.
Right.
And then they had to completely look at it differently from the customer's perspective and what they wanted.
Right. So I think, lesson there is, Kristen, ask yourself, is it critical to the business? And I think critical, and when you're in growth mode, is it, if I spend $1, am I going to get whatever that multiple is back in revenue, right? So when you're starting out, you've got to start growing that business. I know when I launched my first company, I needed, money relatively quickly. And I took a $20,000 gig. I'm like, I don't care what it is. They said it's marketing, and I had to make 6,000 telemarketing calls over the course of 2 months. So you take what you can get, and I did keep my costs down. But anyway, so back to the main point there is, is this critical? Is it critical to the business now? And is this going to help me grow the business? So,
well, and along those same lines, there's a serial entrepreneur I know. And one of the things that he said he didn't realize as he built his business, because he wasn't a business person per se.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, wow, there's people that actually love to all of this stuff I hate.
Bookkeeping.
Right.
Sorry, that's me. No, don't call me. I'm not going to do your books. I have other people do my books. So yeah.
Well, and something like that. And he said, wow, this person just goes straight in, and at the end of the day, they love doing that.
Right. Yep.
He said, I had no clue. So he hires those people to do those tasks, because one, it frees you up to do, whether it's building your business, revenues, so it's something that's revenue producing or building the business, as opposed to keeping the business going.
Right. So I actually have a law firm that I'm consulting with, and one of the things actually we talked to them about this week is that the principal, the owner of the business, is spending a lot of time doing kind of administrative work. And I asked the question, well, what happens if you could have an extra hour of billable time a day and you could farm that out? That has a massive impact, right? So, all right, so let's we'll move on here. We've got a question. Tim mentioned the 1-for-1 marketing cost to revenue stealing future business. When still a small company, is it worth doing that just to build a brand, or should that be an issue that gets addressed right away? Go ahead.
Yeah, it can depend. So in my particular situation, when we were doing it, there's a fixed subset of clientele within a 20-mile radius, because you had to physically go somewhere.
Yep.
So if we were bringing in business, that business would not be repeated.
Okay.
And so for us in particular, we were already fairly full, but we weren't completely full.
And when you say full, what do you mean?
In terms of in our center, the number of kids we could work with.
Okay, the capacity. Yep.
And then so by bringing in that additional child, we weren't going to bring them in the future.
Right.
But more than likely we would have anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
And then so it's a little bit different than some of the other ones. But as you're first building your brand, it's not necessarily always about making money right out the door.
Yeah.
You do have to. You want satisfied clients that can talk about you and say how great you are.
Right. Take it again. This is another one I was consulting with this week. I said, you know what? Maybe you're going to comp this deal, right, and do a complimentary work. It's going to cost you an hour's worth of time, but it's going to be of huge value to that customer. So, all right.
I was just going to say, along those same lines, I worked with this one company that does, they work on social media a lot. Instagram, they're just starting to get into TikTok.
Okay.
And
for now, until it might not be around.
Right, exactly.
We're not going to talk politics. We don't touch politics on the show. But
their whole model is based on giving stuff away.
Right.
And then so
freemium type stuff.
Yeah. And so they send stuff to people who they view can be a spokesperson for them on there.
Right.
And then if they like it, then the only agreement is that they post about it.
Right.
And if they don't like it, they say, send it back.
Right. Yeah. Great model, right? I mean, you find these influencers. So, all right. So last question we're going to hit. This is from Alex. Alex says, do you have any specific tips related to COVID grants, loans, available funds to shore up the business? Wow. What a timely question.
Right.
What insights do you have for Alex?
Well, and we've had a number of them come through already. So I don't know if you've been able to access any of those so far.
Okay.
But when the bank says that you need 2 years of revenues, or you have to prove what you have, I can tell you for the startup I was working on, I was able to get them $6,000. We don't have any revenue.
And now this is through a federal grant, right?
Federal grant that's that we don't have to pay the money back.
Yep.
We have no customers.
Right. And grant, not a loan.
Right.
Very different things. Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes through their loan program, but it's considered a grant. No customers, no product. Right. And they were willing to give $6,000. So the money is out there, and it's also offered within the state itself.
Okay.
And so right now, if you can prove that your company has something related to COVID and can overcome something.
When you say related to COVID, you mean it's been impacted by COVID?
Or you have a solution for it.
Oh, okay.
You know, for example, like we were working through until the emergency rules came through.
Mm-hmm.
What we were trying to do was, because if people are shut in and we can send someone to your home to do notarization, that is helping out the current crisis.
Okay.
And so we were trying to get some funding through that aspect of it.
Okay.
And then the emergency orders were put in so you could do it online, because at that point you couldn't do online notarization. So we were trying to figure out a solution for that. So if your company does do something that can help people that are shut in. And again, we're talking from Wisconsin right now. But for example, the state of Michigan, I just talked to my brother there. They're completely shut down.
Wow.
Movie theaters are shut down, bowling alley, I mean, everything. And so you still have a number of states that are 100% shut in right now still.
Yeah.
And so if you can provide solutions for it, and again, you don't have to just look in our own state. You can look in all these other states, because there's different rules in every single state. And so just because, you know, here we may start to open things, in other areas or other cities, you can get grants from those as well.
Okay. And if people do want information on grants, they can go to SBA, obviously .gov, Small Business Administration.
Exactly.
And then if people want to contact you, so Tim does do consulting work, would you like to share email address, your LinkedIn? What would you like to share, Tim?
Yeah, Shoreline Consulting Corp, CORP.com.
Okay.
And you can contact me through there.
Okay. And then
that's
LinkedIn,
the easiest way.
On LinkedIn, you can be found obviously on LinkedIn, obviously as well.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm on there as well, and just under my own name.
Okay, so. And what we'll do, guys, in the show notes, I'll have both of those links for you. So, Tim, thanks for joining us on the show today. It's great having you. Really, frankly, it's a very important topic. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, especially if things are going badly, but super important. Last thing again, guys, if you haven't got the book yet, Restart the Small Business Guide to Thriving During Chaos. It's on Amazon. Tim's actually in the book. If you want to join the group, if you want to experience these videos live, you do need to be a small business owner and member of our group. It's Restart Small Biz Community on Facebook. If you want to learn more about other services that we provide, restartsmallbiz.com. Again, Tim, thanks for being here. Viewers, thanks for your time, and have an awesome day.